Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus Today. Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio, audio, no pictures live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about doing business with people from low trust societies. Now, because of the mass immigration into the West, pretty much all the immigrants coming in, not every single one, but close to it, come from very low trust societies. Now, you'll probably note that high trust societies are wealthy and low trust society, aside from say the Arab states are sitting on vast amounts of oil, that sort of thing. But if it's productive, manufacturing value add output, then it's the high trust societies that are wealthy, and the low trust societies that are dirt poor. And that rule you could apply pretty much uniformly. So what the West is doing is importing, at the behest and at the direction of the globalist cabal, the West is importing vast numbers of people, the illiterate peasants and so on, from third world countries, low trust countries, into the West. So we've got this now in Australia close to 50% of the population now. It's not quite there, but it's close. Close to 50% of the population all come from low trust societies. Now they're arriving en masse. They're not arriving in a small trickle where it doesn't matter if people from low trust societies arrive in a small trickle, because they readjust, somewhat, not immediately, but over time they adjust to a higher trust society. Whereas when they come in en masse, they hang around in groups. They only do business with each other and these sorts of things. So they maintain their low trust habits. Every now and again, a business that's been set up by these mass migrants, often scams, by the way, but they need help from a Western, local, Anglo business. And I don't mean a business where you go to the shop and buy, the grocery store. I don't mean that, but a business to business type transaction. So sure enough, a Chinese business comes to came to us, and they'd obviously been ringing around, and they happened to get me on the phone. So, and I speak Mandarin, so that, I think that was very clearly the clincher. And so they decided they wanted to do this with. Now we're talking about high tech intellectual property stuff. So now. Well, and I've come across situations like this, sort of similar situations before. So they wanted to have the big meeting, and which I didn't. I wanted to do it online or on the phone, and for us, it's a routine day. We do this sort of stuff every day. It's very routine, straight 101, straight vanilla for us. But for them, doing business with an Anglo, a bunch of Anglos. For them, it was like a monumental fucking exercise, and the whole world had the anxiety present within their behaviour was palpable, and you're trying to calm them down and say, look, this is just straight routine, 101 routine. That for them it wasn't, because they were doing business outside, and they have really two levels. They do business with relatives. Up to and including the wider relatives, second cousins, that sort of stuff. And then the next stage is to do business with people who aren't relatives, but who are within their orbit of control. When I say orbit of control, that they can get to you if you displease them in some way. Or now they're because they come from low trust societies. They're not just paranoid about being ripped off, but paranoid about being cheated or deceived and thus humiliated. That's in fact, that may even be slightly the bigger issue, I think, of the being screwed. But being deceived and thus humiliated is for them double bad, and it's a strange way of looking at the world, to us in the West at least. I mean, nobody wants to be cheated, but these people have a level and type of anxiety that is very typical, I think, of low trust societies. So they want the meeting, and it's a 4-hour like driving, because it was the other side of the city, and it's like a 4-hour fucking round trip, particularly given the time of day they wanted to do it. So I didn't really want to, but they were keen. They weren't prepared to go ahead unless we sat down and had the big talk, and I kind of understood it. Wasn't a vast amount of money for the work they wanted done, but it was, decent enough that I was prepared to go. So go for the meeting. So I arrive, and the business it's like fucking Fort Knox. I mean, it's all these like you go through to get through the first door. It's an electronic security door where you have to I spoke Mandarin because the guy who came he's raving on in Mandarin. Who are you? How many? And all that sort of stuff. That's Mandarin for how many. Jiwaya. So anyway, so I go in. Then there's another. Then there's another door, and someone comes along to eyeball you, and then with much sort of constrained malevolence, and then you get in. And so I'm thinking, I don't know, gee, what are these guys protecting? So anyway, so I go in, and there's only two. There's no Anglos there at all. It's wall-to-wall Chinese, all talking Mandarin. Now, my Mandarin isn't good enough to have a conversation at this sort of level, like a contractual sort of discussion level. So there's only two people could speak English in the company, and one of them was he sort of had a real Bond villain type manner about him. But and I can imagine him calmly ordering someone's take this guy back and shoot him type thing. So anyway, so we're having the conversation, and I tried to sort of not convince them, but explain to them, look, your level of anxiety is out of all proportion to what's at stake here. This is routine 101, straight vanilla. Do it every day. What you're asking for is nothing unique, different, unusual, special. It's straight 101. But we're not coming at that. As far as they're concerned, we can't trust you. We can't control you. You're not a relative, and you're a fucking damn Quilo Anglo. Ghost eyes. Your eyes aren't brown. Ghost eyes, Quilo. And so they took the view that given that we don't have any means to control, as in social means to control, you're not a relative, we have to have legal means to control you. So we need a very extensive, elaborate contract filled with obligations that you must fulfill. That they don't have to fulfill obligations. It's absurdly one-sided, and the level of control and the triggering points are such that should their displeasure be incurred over anything at any time, then vast sort of compensation has to be paid, and it was ridiculously one-sided, and I don't think it would hold up in court for even 1 second, but. And this is coming from someone like me who's done a lot of work in contract and contract law. So anyway, they look. There's no way I'm going to fucking sign that. I'm paraphrasing. I didn't use that language. But I thought, well, I'll try and explain. Look, you guys, and I'm paraphrasing. I didn't use these exact words. You guys come from a low trust society where you don't trust anybody. And you've come to a high trust society, Australia, and you simply don't understand it. You see high trust as naivety. That's your interpretation of high trust. But the naivety only comes if there's one person who's trusting and the other isn't. One person has the intention to deceive, the other is trusting. Then you have that recipe for treachery, as you would see it. But where everyone most people, not every single one, but where most people are trusting, two people get together with that sort of level of social trust, then they can collaborate and quickly get on with the job without having to engage in what's referred to by the economists and so on as the social transaction cost. Because when trust is very low, you've got to have these elaborate contracts, and that increases what's referred to as the transaction cost. So instead of meeting, shaking hands, and getting on with it, I'm simplifying it a bit here, but shaking hands and getting on with it, instead these elaborate, drawn-out contracts are needed, or perceived that they're needed, and that means that the cost of doing business is much higher, and the time to get things done is much longer, and suspicion is rampant throughout all levels of the interaction, and so on. Now, we see transaction cost increasing across all the West now on the basis of, do you believe in mass migration? Do you vote for Donald Trump? Are you on board with, LGBTQ? And therefore, if you're not, then you must be treated with huge social suspicion, not business suspicion or transaction, but social suspicion, which is tantamount to increasing the transaction cost of doing business. It's costing the West gazillions of dollars, this madness, this woke madness, dividing people into camps where no one trusts anyone, that sort of thing. So anyway, so the charge said, look, I'm not going to do it. Again, I'm paraphrasing. I wasn't anywhere near that blunt, but we're not going to sign this thing. So I tried to explain to them this thing of social trust and how it relates to transactional cost and getting things done. And I tried to explain what they wanted done was not unique or unusual. So they were going hysterical to protect something that didn't need protecting, to protect their intellectual property, which was not unique intellectual property. There's a million companies out there doing the same thing, but they wanted to pretend it was unique and then cover it in vast layers of contractual. Now, instead of sort of trying to understand what I was explaining to them, they just saw, well, he's just trying to wriggle out of accountability. I mean, that proves, damn Anglo Quilo, he's not trustworthy. Here we are trying to nail the guy down, and he's trying to. So that proves. So as far as they were concerned, that simply confirmed their concerns over control and so on. So I realised, hey, I'm not getting anywhere here. I wonder if there's a different way I can explain this. So I said, okay, well, look, you want to hold me or any supplier. I mean, I didn't see it in a personal sense, but you want to hold the business, my business, business over sharing. You want to have a level of accountability, but you want a very low bar for triggering legal action. Now, that legal action will be expensive for both of us, and work will have to stop while that legal action is engaged in, while we're going through the courts and so on. That the delay in hearing these sort of cases in the courts is, you join a queue and it takes months to get these things to court. So what will either of us achieve by doing this? Similarly, you don't have any make good clauses here. It's strictly no legal action, 100% legal action. Whereas if you have a legitimate complaint, you need to put it in writing and explain it, and then ask for a make good. Maybe the complaint that you have is a misunderstanding, or it has no legitimacy. Maybe it's a fantasy. Maybe you want to get out of paying, or something. There are a whole range of things here. Again, I didn't phrase it this bluntly, but so I tried to explain that to them and say, look, the aggravation that you're inviting into a situation that's very simple and straightforward is out of all proportion to the stakes here and to the amount of money that's going to be transacted. You're only talking about $150,000 gig. Why would you go to this level of drama over such a small gig? If it was millions, sure. If you had very unique intellectual property, I would get it. But none of the things that would require this sort of onerous contract, none of the feeders, none of the underlying essentials for wanting something this onerous, none of those things exist. Therefore, other than your own personal anxiety and inability to understand a high trust transaction, other than that, there is no reason. So it's only your own anxieties and your misreading of a high trust society that's the cause of this. And they took that as something of not an insult necessarily, but just, why don't you just give us what we want? Reverse upon, why don't you give me what I want? So it didn't really get anywhere, but it was because of the cultural difference. Now, I haven't found Chinese that difficult to get on with on the other side. If you're giving them money and handing over stuff, then they're happy to take it. But once they're spending money, and giving money to you in return for services in this case, then they take a very different view. And so I tried to break it down and say, why don't we just do it a month at a time? And if you have concerns, that we're not adequately addressing, then you can go somewhere else. As long as we're doing the work you want and we're getting paid, then we can keep on going. So that they, no good. No, we have to lock you down tighter than tight. That is the only way forward, as far as they're concerned. That's the only way forward. But it wasn't related to any reality. It was only related to their anxiety and, again, their cultural misunderstanding about how things work in a high trust society. So in the end, it just wasn't worth it. So I had to. So look, I'm not going to, again, not phrase this bluntly, but look, I'm not prepared to continue going around in circles with you guys. We're happy to do the work you want, happy to commit, happy to have a sensible, reasonable, balanced contract, and happy to get on with things and get things done. But you've now worried me to a point where I'm not prepared to go ahead unless you're prepaying. So if you can prepay by week or by month, that doesn't matter to me. But you're going to have to prepay. I'm now, given the way you're behaving, I'm now unprepared to expose my business to what is your arbitrary whim. You insist that your arbitrary whim will determine all. I'm not prepared to expose myself to that. Again, didn't phrase it that bluntly, but they took that as, well, Holly, you're taking away our power. We have to have total power over you. Only that will be satisfactory. In that case, we can't go ahead, guys. So I walked away. Refused to participate further, I suppose, be a better way. Now, I can also talk about East Europeans when they first started arriving in Australia. They were pretty much the same. In fact, there was one recently, we're dealing with an East European, I think the guy's Bulgarian or something. It seems like a nice enough guy, but he's got that very East European thing where they send a flunky out to do the talking while they hide behind the pillar or hide behind the door or peer through the keyhole watching. Very East European. I mean, it is so East European, it's almost, the amount of, including Russians, by the way, that I've done business with. They've got this insanely weird attitude, and they think it's they've got to show how tough they are rather than just get on and do business. But again, they come from very low trust society, so they have to go through and you're not a relative, and so here's this Bulgarian thing. So they send the office junior out who's a local girl, like a teenage girl. They send her out to do all the communicating with us. So we've got the owners of a business having to talk to a teenage intern effectively, and she's the go-between. Well, he hides behind, so whatever communication goes back and forth, like you can tell on the phone, he's there listening, and then he tells her what to say, and then we have to respond back to her, and so it goes back and he's hiding in the bushes, sort of watching it, and again, very East European and seriously pathetic. And we had to, because it goes around in circles where, and they also have this habit of asking the same. This is very East European. Asking the same questions over and over again to try and look if the answer is different or slightly different, which is apparently KGB interrogation techniques, but secret police sort of interrogation, is to try and find, well, last time you said that it cost $1. Now you're saying that it cost 99 cents. Yeah, gotcha, nailed you. And they're like a bit like this in their business negotiations. So they'll ask more or less the same question. Maybe there's a different word in it here or there. More or less the same, and they just keep on doing it. And so by the third time, we said, "Hey, we've already answered these questions. We're not going to answer them again unless you have a very specific point to make or very specific piece of information you're attempting to extract from this. But otherwise, we've already answered these questions. Oh, but can you fill out this new form and answer them again? No, we can't." So we came back, and and thought, okay, well, look, maybe there's a lot of business. It doesn't look like there's much business here, but we should ask, how much, what is your budget, like dollar expenditure over the next year or so? What are you intending to spend? Now, if they came back and said gazillions, then we would be prepared to put more time into it. But if they come back and say, well, look, it's a couple of bucks, then no, we're not playing this silly game. Because the silly game isn't because the business transaction requires it. It's only because the guy is an East European with zero social trust. And again, he particularly sees that high social trust is simply naivety. He doesn't see it as a social trust issue and doesn't conceive transactional cost. He sees it direct. It's naive. So if I trust you, then I'm the naive one and you're screwing me. So I have to exploit your naivety, not the other. And so they cannot comprehend social trust. And it creates, again, a massive additional transit. Now, I just want you to sort of get your head around this, that nearly all the Indian and Chinese businesses and other businesses, Bulgarian in this case and so on, they typically will employ maybe one local person, and everyone else is Bulgarian or Chinese or Indian or fucking Pakistani or whatever. So they're not employing the local people. So they're not coming to this country or the West generally and making the economy grow for everybody's benefit. And they're not doing that. They're creating parallel economies, parallel societies, parallel economies. And if there is any interaction between the two, and the Chinese company or the Bulgarian guys coming to us and that sort of thing, then the transaction cost is massive. And because they will only employ relatives or people they can control, as in they got relatives back in China that can be intimidated in the event there's any sort of dispute or conflict or something like that, then the transaction cost of doing business is held at a low trust level, and therefore the cost of doing business is much higher than it should be or would have been or was. So this is a severe, brutal body blow to the Western economies, and I don't think that the globalists have really thought this through, or that they give a shit, because their profits are guaranteed. So why would they care? You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.